Yes, we'll call the meeting to order. This is our November 18 committee of the whole meeting. Approve the agenda. We've had a request for an in-camera, which would be for disclosure. So I think it's more of a disclosure harmful to business of a third party. I don't know if I have to read that all, but either way, a motion to approve the agenda with the one additional item. Councillor Poitras makes that motion. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. And we're going to move on to unfinished business, which we want to talk about water. And perhaps, Anthony, do you want to introduce this to us first and what you're hoping for tonight? And then we can, or can go right to Brendan too if you want.
I don't mind introducing it. As we discussed in our last committee of the whole meeting, council and administration kind of trying to get to the same point in the water rates and what we are to do kind of moving forward with our water rates, our base rate and our consumption rate. And there were a few things that were requested of us, and we have gathered a bit more information on that, and we'll get into that when we do. But yeah, I mean, we have looked at the timeline. Initially, we were kind of hopeful to get everything done this year before January begins. But we understand that, with the many variables in play here and making sure that we do a full, I guess, thorough review of the process and understanding just exactly what we're trying to accomplish here. We understand that that might not be the case as we're bumping into, past the middle of November. But there are ways to implement it partway through the year. If we implement it in January, we still can get it for all of 2026. But I mean, I think it's better that it is done right than it is done fast. And so we're here today. Brendan's put more work into it, and we'll have a good discussion as this is a committee of the whole. Hopefully there's lots more questions and discussion on the matter to further this item along. So with that, I'll turn it over to Brendan. Which one? Oh, this little guy. Oh, I can introduce that one first, yeah. Brendan's like, this thing that you made, you want me to do this? Yeah, I can definitely jump into the municipal cost comparison sheet. This came at the request as currently right now we are looking at, we've had discussions on franchise fees. We're currently having a discussion on utility rates. And then obviously the question of property tax is always something we are considering, right? How does the total revenue of what the town is bringing in, how does that compare? How does living in Fort Macleod compare to our neighboring communities? And so we put together this little cost comparison. We picked all of our immediate neighbors, the municipalities just outside of us that we can get to within half an hour. Then we picked a few other ones based on population. And then a few, the last ones there, Tabor and Coaldale, they're kind of like the big brother towns. We're like, hey, what are they up to? Because they're growing and they're movers and shakers. And so we thought we'd throw them in there too. So listed Fort Macleod, Claresholm, Pincher Creek, Cardston, Colehurst, Nanton, Raymond, Diamond Valley, Tabor, and Coaldale. So if you can take a look at that, it's pretty simple. We identified the municipal utility service rates, and I pulled this information off of their websites. And we can see how much total monthly fixed fees they have, and it varies across municipalities, which is something that we were aware of. And then we go into the variable fees based on usage, and we took household water usage based on some of Brennan's figures, 35 cubes a month. So that comes to a total utility services, and you can compare the different municipalities along there. I think, yeah, there are a few that within just the utilities that are a bit lower than us, but we're very competitive there. Franchise fees are really quite small amounts, and we just took an average amount with a certain size of home and tried to take some averages there. But we are quite competitive in that as well, with ATCO gas franchise fee, electrical franchise fee. And then we took property taxes property taxes, we took the average assessment value of our community, so that's 291,000. And then with the individual mill rates, and obviously that was the error in the updated sheet. I forgot to put that monthly. It was the annual property taxes that I had in there first. So on the bottom, you can see that's the total municipal costs, monthly costs for the different communities. And one thing to note, and I didn't pick the communities based on us being the lowest. I picked the communities on our neighbors, and like I said, for various reasons based on their growth and our community makeup. But out of this group, we edge out Raymond by $1.20 there. But as you can see, our monthly costs for our residents are quite competitive. Out of this group, they are the lowest. I think it's fair to take a look at these other figures and say, you know, what is the service level that the town of Fort Macleod wants to provide? What is, you know, what are our goals long-term? You know, I don't think we ever want to be the highest. If we want to always be the lowest, I think that kind of determines some of the service levels that are available to us. I think that we do provide good service right now, even at these prices and at this being the lowest amount in just these categories. But yeah, we wanted to kind of capture this for council's information to see how we compare to a number of communities. I'd like to, if you have any questions or further clarification on this, I'd gladly try to answer. Oh, I see a formula error. Cardston's bottom line has to go up by $86. The total didn't drag down, but. Any questions? Does council find this information useful? Oh, yeah, sorry, by a percentage. Oh, no, because they don't have a franchise fee. Never mind.
Right.
That total was missed on purpose. I thought it was just because it was multiplying, but no, they didn't have a franchise fee because they own their electrical distribution system. I don't know how that works. I wasn't able to gather that information just yet, so I just left it, so.
Yes.
No,
Not Cardston.
They've still got it,
Crozes Pass.
Yeah, so I did have a question about that. They must have some sort of charge for electrical distribution, which would be the equivalent of a franchise fee.
yeah,
So
I
that
just,
skews it. In anything, it would increase their total, not lessen it.
of course, yep.
Did you dare send this to your colleague CAOs to confirm the data?
Actually, that was my intention. I spoke to some of them at Alberta Municipalities last week, and we said, hey, I've got this thing, and they were actually quite excited that I did all the work. And I said, I'd love to send it to you. We can like make sure I'm getting it right, because some people, you know, the scenarios are unique, right? Where Nantons, they're actually bi-monthly, and so at first I had them in there doubled, and so there's a few small details like that that you have to understand, but yeah, it is my intention to send it to all my CAO counterparts and say, hey, is this accurate? And then once it's accurate, we can just put it in the newspaper and just let everyone know how great it is to live in Fort Macleod.
On the website.
Yeah, of course, yeah, that'd be great.
Actually, just wanted to make a comment. I really appreciate that you put this kind of comprehensive look at what our charges are to our residents. And it's very helpful to me. It gives a perspective of how each of these different collection points affect the overall cost of living in Fort Macleod. I had to look at the numbers kind of closely to see what was going on. I totaled a few up to make sure that I understood what was happening. So, but I thought it very useful. And then I also had the question about, I would think that our residences would be interested in being able to see this. Now, I'm sensitive about making comparisons to other communities, but even to be able to put what the averages are of other communities, because, yeah, I don't want to be singling out and getting to a match with other communities, but I think this type of thing might be helpful for individuals to look at. There would have to be some notes to explain how each of those things are arrived at in order for it to be useful, but I think it's something worth looking at, of sharing this kind of overarching view of what the costs are to live in Fort Macleod relative to other communities.
Yeah, and we would like to create a nice more user-friendly, like Canva, almost with some like animation or something to gather the info, like a little more presenter-friendly. This is just straight accountant spreadsheet. We had Miranda too busy to take my work and make it all pretty and fancy, and so we'll get there. But I think it is a good start to compare the information.
And how would that look if you, say, added Lethbridge? Because in many ways, that's who we're competing against. And to some degree, the MD of Willow Creek. I know that might be a little harder. But on the flip side, that would be, I think, more Lethbridge with the MD if possible, because I know how they assess residential and how they do. They just don't have the utilities, so it's a little harder for sure.
Yeah, they definitely, what's their mill rate? Ours is 5.5, theirs is like 3.2. And then they don't have the utilities. We could definitely do it. It would just be less apples to apples because they're just a different beast.
Yeah. Yeah, probably more the city, I'm thinking.
Yeah, how we compare to the cities, yeah. That wouldn't be difficult at all.
Any questions on this comparable data that we have? Comments, feedback? Is it helpful? Okay.
Just looking at, the reason we're looking at this is to see how we compare with our water costs. And clearly, if you look across the board, we're a little above the average. There's one that's Pincher's considerably higher. And then after that, we're the next highest, right? Yep. So, there's a little bit of a sensitivity there about increasing that.
You're right there. If you're looking at the base rates, but you look at base rates plus usage. I mean, that's
Sorry, Jim, you're right. We need to look at that rate. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so,
And so the comment, thank you for bringing that up, because the comment,
yeah, because we needed to get the usage figure in there.
exactly, that's the direction we want to go, is to reduce the base rate so we become more in line with some of our comparatives, and then increasing the usage rate, and which also, there are some,
Right.
yeah, we are pretty cheap on the per cubic meter right now.
In investigating these other communities, did any of these other communities use a variable rate structure for their usage?
You mean like the laddering system where if you use more, you get a better or worse deal? Yes, I didn't make note of that, but I'm pretty sure. Was it Nant? I'll double check that, but yeah, there were some. I know that. I think we did some of that. We gathered some of that information when we were doing our comparables. Like, didn't Curtis have some of that? Like, who had laddering structures that you either paid more if you used a lot more, or you got a better deal if you used a lot more? I didn't gather that for this comparison, though. Do you remember having that? Like, I think that was originally done when Curtis took the information, but we might not have it available.
Yeah, and I think it was more of a note, like you said. And with the numbers, I think that you pulled, everything would be in that first tier. So that's where the pricing's coming from.
And maybe in addition to that question, did other communities have out-of-town rates?
Yeah, there were some that had out-of-town rates. I kept this pretty simple, just on the residential, because some of the commercial rates and variable things were a little bit different, but. I don't know the answer to that at this point.
Okay. Go with this next. We've looked at the comparables. We've had a lot of discussion on the ladder, the base rate, the proposed new base rate, consumption rates. Anyone have any other thoughts, questions, comments?
I was curious if Chris, did you want to share that spreadsheet? You loaded it, good. So Chris had worked on a spreadsheet at the request for some additional information. You got it in there. I don't have it in front of me. Chris, you want to just kind of explain through that? You bet. Awesome.
And sorry, this sheet is trying to tie in the water rates to our operating budget?
Yeah, this sheet is taking a look at current revenues of water under our current system between residential, commercial, and municipal, and then going to what our proposed rate changes would do, which there's some really important data in this information.
Good evening, Council. I was asked by Councillor Monteith if I could just do a quick summary of how the proposed water rate changes for 2026 impact the overall water budget. So I went in and I pulled a bunch of data from our accounting system, and I just pulled the data, and I'll show you one page. This is all the tens, which is residential. And I would put in, I'll just go to the top so you can see. For gosh sake. Okay, so I would put in what they used, or what their flat prior year, and I used 2024 because it was a full year. So I put in their full costs that we billed them in 2024 for the year. I put in the old rate for water, and I figured out how many months that was. And then I put in the new rate, and I projected for that many months at the new rate, what would the revenue be going forward. So I did that for all our categories, and then I summed them up at the bottom. So this is residential, it's the 10, so it's the basic house. So we had, on the old rates, we charged $25,000. With the new, there's a 10, and then there's some subcategories that are still residential. So for the houses, we went from $615,000 to $430,000. So that was the decrease, and there's a summary that I'll get to. And then for the other residential categories, we go from $25,000 to $19,000. So overall, it goes from $640,000 to $448,000. And so when we come back here, you'll see those two numbers here, and then you'll see the difference. So I did that for residential, I did it for commercial basic, I did it for all of our categories in commercial. And for the basic commercial stuff, we go from 118 to 95. So that's a drop of 22,000. And then I went into industrial and institutional, and we go from 47 to 36. So when you go back to the summary for flat charges, all those numbers are in there, and we go from 806 to 560, 580. So it's a drop of $225,000. So then I went into the consumption portion of our bills. And this is the summary of our consumption, but it goes to the front too. So I'm just gonna go into some of the tabs. So first I did your average commercial, which is our 20s, we call them. And so this is car washes, auction mart, restaurants, car dealerships, those kind of businesses. So I just wanted to show you, and maybe I'll go through the logic of this one. So I went through them all, figured out what they consumed. This is a very tiny one, but if it's below 100 cubic meters, they were charged $1. So whatever this is times 1. Under the new rates, whatever's under $100 gets charged $1.25. So for anything under 100 cubic meters, they got charged on that the $1.25. So instead of $98.30, they would now pay $122.90. So then anyone over 100 meters up to 150, so this category here, on the first 100 meters, they pay $1.25. So they have to pay $125 on the first 100. On the next section, they pay $1.50. So for those 3.5 extra cubic meters, they pay $1.50 on those. So that's the next step. So then for the big users, which are over 150 cubic meters, first 100 cubes is $125, second is 50, that's the second step, they pay 75, and then anything in excess of that, they pay the $1.75. So I went through them all, and where on the other flat rate of $1, they paid $121,000. These are the 3 steps, so this is up to 100 meters, up to 150 meters, and anything over 150 cubic meters. So they are now paying $205,000. So in this category, I said there's car washes, auction marts, restaurants, and car dealers. And so 125 is the new rate with 100 meters, right? No, the 50 is the next 50 cubic meters, and they pay 75 for those cubic meters. And then whatever's left over, they pay $1.75 on. So that's the step method. So that's what we're talking about. So I did that for the regular commercial, and then I went into some subcategories, which are still commercial, but they're a little bit bigger. And this is the motels, the detox center. And then these are our out-of-town users are here too. So these are big users, motels and the detox center. So you'll see where they used to pay $17,000 for water for the year. Now they're paying $30,000. So it's a big jump for the big users. And then these are our 2 out-of-town water users. And this is an actual meter read for that property for the year. This one, the meter's broken, so we just estimate 80 cubic meters per month. So I just use those numbers. So for out-of-town users, the rates are different. So for the first 100 cubes, you pay $2.50 a cube. So that's $250. For the next 50, you pay $3 a cube, so that's $150. And for the rest of it, you pay $3.50. So those are, instead of paying $9,400, it's now this plus another $400, so $32,800. And then we go into industrial, and these are some of our final users. So this is hospitals and schools. Anything that's in kind of the green shading are town properties. So it's the same step method. So where they were previously paying $132,000, they would now be paying $228,000. And these are like car washes and the big users. So I will go back to the summary because you guys don't want to look at spreadsheets with me all night. All right, so here's the summary. We talked about the flat rates up here. This is the change for each of the classes. This is the net change for flat rates. And then we go down to consumption. And these are the net changes for consumption. So we have a drop in our flat rates and an increase to our consumption and we end up gaining about $54,000 based on my estimate. And then Anthony asked me to break it down per kind of category. So residential, the change for residential for basic rates is going down. The consumption rate is going up. So overall, they're paying less, about $110,000. Then you get into the non-residential, and their basic rates are going down by these two, which is the $33,000. Their consumption is going up by this, which is this number. So they are picking up $163,000 of the costs, and those two numbers together get us to the net $54,000 estimate. So I think Anthony wanted to kind of talk about this on a theoretical basis.
Thanks, Chris, and I really appreciate you putting all those numbers together. This is a really good comparison, and we've been meaning to get to kind of this level of detail to understand what this shift would essentially do in the community. And I do think it couples well with our with the comparison with other communities, because while in theory we do want to get closer to a reduced basic rate and an increased usage rate, upon looking at these numbers, this is a drastic change for our business community. I don't think right now, essentially our residents, yes, I mean, the residents wouldn't complain about collectively saving $109,000, but it's at least what we're accustomed to at this point. While the business community, that adjustment would be far more stark. So yeah, I guess the theory of it, and one thing we were kind of brainstorming today with Chris and I was, would we eventually like to get to the point where businesses are subsidized less by residents for their water usage? Yes, I do think that's the appropriate direction to go, where businesses, especially high-use businesses, are paying more for the water because that's how they're making their money. And residents, yes, there are way more residents, so their contributions to the water system, it's easier for them to make contributions that maybe other people are benefiting from as well. But upon kind of further investigation of these numbers, I don't think that a flip of the switch to this magnitude would be wise. So I think what we need to come to is a system where we can show whatever time period we see necessary to get to something closer to this, where we have shifted over a period of time, but where we're working with percentages on an annual basis to get to an end goal that would be a lot more palatable for our businesses, so that you're going up a few percentage a year. Whether or not we take all of this into, roll it out into the application of what we want to accomplish, but when you look at it like this, and when you see a business who will pay $5,000 more for water because they're a heavy water user, or some of the big ones, it's $12,000 more for water in any given 1 year. That is quite the stark change. So, yeah, so Chris and I kind of went through this today, so we don't have a whole lot of direction to give council. What I would like to propose is that we come up with a plan that says, hey, here we are. Here's how many years we want to go to get to this point where we roll out percentages that will slowly adjust us from basic to variable, and vice versa, where we slowly adjust from residential to commercial and industrial, so that the residents are subsidizing less of the commercial rates. So, lots to unpack here, but that's kind of where we got to. And we didn't actually have a great conversation with Brennan about it, because this was, in these last few days, he's catching most of this off by surprise because he's been very busy these last couple of days.
Okay, did you want to add anything, Brennan, before we get started on some dialogue?
I think, like Anthony said, if we can be looking at, okay, what is that direction? And even if we can come to, okay, what does that actually look like? Then we can look more into the numbers, what those rates are, how that looks. So even if we have and again, just kind of coming into this, even if we have this is the direction we're gonna go, what's the actual target? How do we want to get there? Then that'll give us something more to build on.
And did we have an agreed on target? Like, we see that 54,000 there right now. Like, is that a target or is that just where it landed?
That's just where it landed. We didn't have a target per se. I know previously we had talked about, moderate increases annually so that it was a lot more palatable for all of the rate payers. But
And if I may, have you played with any other scenarios when doing this? Like, what does it look like if you did just the one ladder instead of two? Have you played with, 'cause to me, I think I mentioned last meeting too, the out of town rates. We have to find a way to sell that. Like, what is the right number? Is it double? Because based on some of the numbers, I think their rates would go up times 3, almost 3.5 from what they are now, which, like I mentioned last meeting, I think that would be my declaration of war.
the rates would still be below the bulk water rate.
Yeah, if that's what we want to
If
accomplish.
that's where they were going, yeah.
Yeah.
Just as a side
Yeah.
note, that if I was an out of towner and I had to bulk or transport my own water, this would still be a cheaper option. And obviously the infrastructure and property tax and everything else.
If we're gonna say we're gonna maintain the line, we're gonna remove the line, we're gonna improve the line, if we're gonna put new meters in, this is what it's gonna look like in 5 years. Based on you paying those rates, I can see there could be a sell to it. But without a sell, this is not palatable at all, in my opinion. But, because I think that needs to be clarified and to know, I don't think that agreement's gone that far. I know we've invested a bunch in the other user, out-of-town user, with a new meter. Because those lines have, in my recollection, no utility easement across the lands that they're running on. So at some point, somebody's gonna have to be responsible for moving those lines, so they're actually in a utility easement somewhere. And whose responsibility is that? Is that us? Is it not? If at these rates, it would become ours, I would say. And we would have to say this is when we would plan to move it. Those are all things that come to my mind, but otherwise, I think the numbers are making sense. I just wonder what other scenarios could look like if we said, hey, let's just do one rate of $1.25 and then increase it after that. Or if we do a ladder, is first 100 cubics the right number to start at, or maybe we raise it up a little bit, maybe we shrink it. And those are thoughts that come through my mind, but
I think,
I'll open it.
and like Brendan had kind of asked, I guess for us, if we understand where council wants to be at the end of the day, like, so if we're saying, like, setting some things out there, like, do we want residents as a whole and like individually kind of maintaining the status quo? Or do we want, like, because, that's one thing, like, any savings, no savings, do we want to see a certain percentage increase? Because we can scenario this thing a lot, to no end, right? We can change it up, we can look at things. And so I guess if we want to, I think the base from administration's perspective, we want to maintain the revenues we have now, because that is what our budget is based on and what we've, that's the revenue that we are accustomed to, with moderate amounts for growth, right, as we move forward. So that's where we'd like to be. To be totally honest, like, am I too hung up on the base rate minus the usage rate? Like, it's not the end of the world. It just allows for us to, I guess the theory of it is to try to help people prevent using more water. And if they do use more, the town gets more revenue for it because the system's getting used more, right?
Yeah, and there's another scenario where you could have a different benchmarks for residential versus commercial. They don't have to be the same 100, 150 and above, but those are all things that we can play with. Any other thoughts? I think Anthony is looking for us. Ultimately, what is our goal is probably the bigger question. Councillor Monteith?
Couple concerns. Our estimated profit for 2025 is $100,000 less than it was the year before. And all we're talking about with this is 50,000 increase in revenue, which isn't an increase in profitability. So I think we have to be concerned with that. The other thing that concerns me is, and I've mentioned this at past meetings, I did a calculation. If we put a surtax of $3 on this, the one-time rate, over 10 years, we'd raise $550,000, which we could use toward capital because they estimate $2.5 million in 2033. And we've also, my understanding, looking at new meters. Plus, at what point does the capacity of the plant not meet the demand? So I believe we need to put that surtax on it. And of course, if you double it, $6, which is not a lot, that's $1.1 million we'd have that we wouldn't have to borrow when we get into the new capital. And that makes sense to me because we're current residents and future residents are then paying. So, but the income level concerns me because that goes into general revenue. And if we're down $100,000, we got to get that somewhere else.
Sorry, when you're saying we're down 100,000,
Yeah, the estimate for 2025 is 400 and 2024 was 508,000 profit. No, there's a chart here. Yeah, right near the top of Brennan's. It's the water historical data. There's not page numbers, so I can't help. It's about 4 pages in. No, it's Fort McLeod Waterworth Collaboration Water Historical Data.
so you're saying the projected surplus is not enough?
No, not if it's going down $100,000, no.
Just to be talking about this, so these are from our numbers that we are tracking as far as actuals, but this was an estimate made a little while ago. So I guess I can't vouch for how accurate that isn't as of today where our projections are looking at. So I don't know if you have anything new, Chris, but those are from when we were pulling numbers with Curtis. Yeah.
So if we can go back to the ultimate goal, I think when we started this discussion is to lower the base rate and increase the consumption rate. So it's more reflective of water that's actually being used. I don't know that we've ever had a real solid discussion on what we wanted to see as the ultimate outcome of revenues. Like in my mind, I don't think the goal was to save residential a whole bunch of money. I don't think that was ever talked about. whereas now it's looking like it would be close to $200,000 in savings, or 100,000 in savings for residential. So, yeah. Any other thoughts and comments on the ultimate vision, Councillor Poitras?
Yeah, I understand the concept of, kind of redispersing it so that higher users are, paying a little bit more for their usage. I guess looking at these numbers and crunching data a little bit, I also was concerned with what that meant for the high usage users and that sharp increase in their monthly water bills. So if there's a way that we can kind of smooth that out and make that a little more gradual or not quite as stark, I'm all for that. But yeah, as far as overall, yeah, I agree that we should probably, the high water users should probably pay a little bit more for their usage, those that make profit off of the water. I don't know, it'd be nice to save some money for the residentials. I don't know if it needs to be that stark as well. So, yeah, I would be in favor of looking at a more gradual option. And I think Jim's surtax idea is something to look into as well.
As a percentage of revenue versus percentage of water used, how much does that percentage change with this new model, would we say, Because I think that's the goal, is try to make sure those using the water are paying for it, right? So not to necessarily reduce one for the other. Maybe some, but I'm just wondering how much that would have changed in between these two different.
Yeah, and I think when this process was initiated, I think the idea was to, on the residential side of things, right? Because the change, with reducing the base rate, increasing the usage rate, I think we're trying to keep it so that they didn't see a big change. But by doing so and implementing the rest of that rate across both categories, residential and non-residential, that those savings had to be picked up somewhere else, right? Because essentially the mathed out, 54,000 isn't a whole lot in the grand scheme of all of the water revenues. And so that's kind of where it landed. As far as, what was your question, Brent? The base rate? No.
Yeah, just the total water
Percentage.
consumed for residential versus non-residential, how much the percentage would have changed in terms of revenue to consumption.
Okay, yeah, I don't think we have that calculated right now, but.
The other thought I had too, like if whatever we do, I think we need to make it very clear. Like Cardston's doing a new water treatment plant, correct? And it's a $17 million project. And it's, I think, covered 70% by grants or something. But either way, I think it's important to Jim's point earlier is if we know we have this big capital cost, which I think in the Waterworth report it suggested that by 2032 or 33, we need to make an investment of, what did they suggest? I think it was a $2.5 million water storage expansion. And that's just the water storage expansion. That's not capacity growth. That's just maintaining what we have. So I think as long as we're very clear on what the surplus is getting used for and saved for, then I think either way that we need to do that. But, Councillor Patience?
Yeah, a couple of things. We've talked in just my few short meetings with you all about these non-resident or out-of-town rates, and the discussion has ensued about the agreements I would like to see a copy of the agreements that we have with out-of-town water users, because I'm a little fuzzy on what they're holding us to exactly. And I'm certainly not in favor of our taxpayers paying for infrastructure for out-of-town water users. I want to put that on the table right now. That should be self-funded by those that are using that water, or there's other options then to look at. But when we look at these rates, adjusting these rates to put more emphasis on those that use more water, I think is absolutely the right course of action to take. And I think something we don't want to lose in this whole picture is this also strongly promotes conservation. And the time will come, and it did 2 years ago, 3 years ago, when we were faced with the potential of strong water shortages. So this isn't just about money and surpluses. This is also about conserving so that we actually have enough water to support our municipality as well. So I think the trend to move more reduction of the base rate and increasing the consumption rate is a good one, and it might be a bit dramatic in this particular case, but that can be brought down on one side and up on the other to mitigate that. Brent, you mentioned a buy-in period, and maybe we look at a 5-year step process so that everyone's well aware and that this is the end goal. Jim's idea, I think, is good, but I don't want to lose sight of the fact that increasing usage rates also has the desired effect of forcing people into more conservation of that water as well.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate the conservation. I think we all know in today's day and age, we would have to analyze the opportunity for conservation besides the risk of lawns getting not watered and things like that. So I think there's risk with putting it too high too on the consumption rate. They could also have a direct impact to the viability of businesses doing business in town. But we still have, because all the comparisons we have are strictly residential, right? The chart that you did. So we don't really have an analysis of commercial to be able to say, at some point businesses will say, I'm out of here, this doesn't work. Right, so that would conserve water, but it's probably not the intent that we want. So I think all those things have to play in. I'm not sure if it's worth doing one of these for commercial. I know it's a lot of work, but it may be helpful.
Most of the rates were the same, like they'd use the same or similar, they'd be not too far off. And so we can see that. Yeah, we can get some additional information on commercial as well. But I think what administration would like to do is probably take this, come back with a plan that shows, a more gradual adjustment. Because I think it's been pretty clear that council said that, yep, a little more consumption, a little less basic, a little more gradual in the change, and the increases should be palatable.
To council patients, maybe at our next committee of whole or a council meeting, we could have an in-camera discussion on the out-of-town legal agreements. I think that would be in order. I think some of those would be more of a legal discussion.
Yeah, we can bring you up to speed
Maybe
on this.
not all of it, but some of
Yeah.
it anyways.
And we can let you guys know, yeah.
I just want to say one more thing. I just did some quick calculations on the water report. So currently in 2025, the residential users pay 52% and commercial users pay 48%. So that's the split, just so you know.
On consumption. Pardon me? Yeah, like that's the actual water volume, or is that the revenue? That's the revenue. So it'd be neat to see what the split is on actual water consumption too.
Brendan, you have that in your,
Was that in there?
yeah, he'll show, he has a
Yeah,
chart
that's in the
that shows.
Waterworth.
Yeah, so in the last two slides on the Waterworth presentation, it has the comparison. So it has a current rate structure, and then the last slide is the proposed rate structure, and it gives percentages for both residential and commercial.
About 45%. Yeah.
Sorry, could I just make a comment? You know, I think our concern from this new information is what looks like a dramatic increase it would be for our commercial users. And that all gives us some concern. I don't think the residential is going to see much difference. There are those who might be the higher users that it's going to tack on some more for them, but clearly we don't want to drive business away. But we don't know, I haven't heard any information that would suggest that a commercial car wash in Lethbridge is paying less or more than what a commercial car wash would be paying here in town. And it may be that the norm is that for a commercial car wash, and I'm just using that as an example, a high commercial user. In other communities, they may be paying the rates that we are shocked at simply because we're comparing them to what our rates are now. And so unless we know what the market rates are for commercial users out in other communities, we really don't know whether we're asking too much of our commercial users or not. And so at some point, we have to have that information, even if we're looking at gradualizing the increase to a certain level, whatever that level might be. So I think there has to be some more information acquired that way so that we actually have something to talk to these high commercial users that, you know what, you're still getting a good rate. And this is what it is, and this is the balance that we need to try to get to. And obviously, I would agree with the gradual implementation if it's a significant change. But even there, you might look at, well, it's an $18,000 a year difference. Well, you'd have to compare that to their cash flow and their budget. $18,000 may not be that much of a difference in their overall budget, right? To us, it seems like, wow, that's huge. Well, if it's $500,000, it may not be that big. So I think we have to have some more information on the commercial users. But the intent of what you're looking at, I'm in agreement with that. And of course, billing or budgeting for future capital purchases is clearly something that we have to be looking at now so that we can spread that cost out. Thanks.
Very good. Anthony, does that give you?
I think so. I
Some
would
workplace.
I just wanted to, I mean, Brennan, could you just identify clearly, just council, I understand this little chart here. I know it was kind of briefly described, but if you could just explain exactly what we're looking at there so that council's understands it well.
Yeah, so, and I think this talks to, Mayor, to what you were asking. So on the left-hand side, you're seeing the residential. And so that's where those two bars are with the note at the top. So the lighter blue is the actual water consumption, and then the revenue contribution, so it gives you those two percentages. Yeah, so right there. So when you're looking at residential, they're consuming about 45% of the water, the total water, and they're getting billed about 61% of the total value like that we're getting in cost. So, and again, this is the current rate structure. So then you have the note over on the graph on the right, and so that's highlighting the commercial. So it's the same graph, but it's just the very left ones. So then when you look at commercial, their water consumption is about 12% of the total, and their build is about 10.3. So then if you go to the next slide down, this is the same thing, but these are with our proposed rates that we worked with Waterwork on. So then you're seeing that the water consumption stays the same, but then the projected revenue, it drops from that, I think it was in 60, almost 62, down to the 52. And then you see something similar on the consumption. So yeah, not much change there as far as the total values. And I guess that's where Chris's values comes in, where we're looking at those actual numbers and what that means.
Yeah, and for non-res and our comparable, you have to add up everything except the residential, correct?
Yes, that's correct. So this was focused directly on that one section of commercial, and I think, yeah, there is a key down the bottom, so that would be the commercial, but it's the institutional would be part of that, the industrial, and then the municipal properties.
So bottom line, non-res would be 45 or 55% of the consumption, and for 39% of the revenue.
Yeah, if you just went completely, then you just flipped the ratios from the residential.
Okay. And that's probably largely due to because this is current structure, right? We don't have a proposed structure in the same report, do we?
Yeah, the proposed one is the last slide,
Oh, yeah.
and the one just above it is the
So
current
he
one.
evens it out a little bit, but not.
Yep.
Okay, so again, 45%, 55% of the consumption, but 48% of the revenue. Okay. Anything else you need from us on this one, Anthony? Yeah.
So do I also hear you saying that we're not going to be jumping ahead with this until there's much more discussion on it? Like this isn't something that we're implementing even in early 2026? Probably
wouldn't-
not, or it would be adjusted considerably.
Yeah, it would be very, yeah,
Okay,
to have this ready to go by 26, I mean, it could happen, but there would be more additional discussion. We bring it back
Okay.
again. Like I said, what we will probably bring forward is a bit of a plan, really demonstrating the change in residential and commercial. And now that we kind of recognize the significant change, seeing how we would implement that change over a time period.
I would just also like to add, thank you for the effort made to really dig into the numbers, because it gives us something to work with. Really appreciate that.
All right. Councillor Boutros?
Yeah, sorry, just a question. Chris, I was wondering if you'd be able to share that spreadsheet that you made with council as well? Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Going on then to our provisional operating budget. I believe our Director of Finance did a lot of more work on it and has some changes. And I believe the goal would be to get to a point where we can take this to a near future council meeting for approval, correct?
Thank you, Mayor Fader. Yes, if council is happy with, if council is happy with the changes that I've made to the interim budget, then it would come to council for approval as an interim budget on December 8th. We're not having a 22nd meeting. All right, I'm just gonna pull it up. So really all I did on the changes on this budget since the last time you guys have seen it from the Infrastructure and Finance Committee meeting is I made the changes that I put in the report. So I just did a little tweaking. So I moved some swim lesson revenue that I had misallocated to the wrong GL. We did a correction to the River Valley Park repairs and maintenance. I moved to the expense to the correct GL account, and we reduced it by $4,000 because Brennan spoke with Tyson, had had a discussion with them because we were talking about that budget item and they reduced it. Lisa was going to speak with the fire chief about the split between MD and town calls, and she can talk with you guys about that later. And then you had a question for Anthony to talk to Lance about if he has an estimation on how the assessments are going, and there's a vague paragraph there that says he will talk to us when it's closer to the end of the year. And then cat bylaw estimates, Lisa put some information in about the cat control measures and how that's all split out. And then on the next page, we added the $25,000 to the airport budget for the master plan that council approved. So that's in the airport budget now. I added the new expense. Brendan and I spoke about the Public Works building maintenance cost, and it was reduced from $20,000 to $12,000. And then we did, there was a question about reducing the advertising in the development department that I ixnayed because $500 isn't even close to what the development department uses up from our advertising budget. And then the building repair and maintenance budget, that line was reduced to $5,000. So it was reduced from $25,000 to $5,000. The strategic plan budget that's in council's department was reduced from $35,000 to $25,000 based on quotes that the CAO received. I will be incorporating the changes in the solid waste bylaw for this year because there is a $2 increase to residential services, but I like to wait until the first bill runs with the new rates, and then I can do a better estimation. So that will be in the final budget when you guys see it in the spring. Training Inc. rent, yes, some of that is admin's revenue now since they're taking up a room in our part of the building. So that'll be reallocated. I did the October bank rec, but I did it a little bit after I submitted this report. So that'll all be coming through. And then the pool budget, the full pool surface repainting is expected to last 5 years. So that's just an explanation on what that cost is for. And then on the final page of the reconciliation to the balanced budget, I've entered actual transfer revenue to the 10th Street infrastructure project that the mayor was kindly enough to remind me that it's an annual thing that we're trying to do. So once I allocated that money to that project, I had to bump up the cost coming from reserves for that signalization project on Highway 3 and 18th. So you'll see that in the final page of the report. However, it still balances. So it's still a balance, with all those changes, it still balances. So I don't know if council has any questions on the changes I made or some of the tweaking I did on this final page of the report. But this is what we're proposing to bring to council on the 8th for interim final budget. Thank you.
Oh, very good. So balance is currently at the last year's assessment values.
Yes, so like I said, at infrastructure and finance, net tax revenue stays static at this point, and then we'll start discussing assessment and mill rates in the spring, and that'll make some changes probably.
Okay, does council have any questions on what was presented? I think overall we'll have more discussions as we get closer to the final operating budget, but this will be interim. I don't see any surprises. Councilor Patience.
No, it certainly isn't. Okay, I guess that's close enough. So I just haven't gone through this again. So we're noting the land sales in the operating budget, Chris, is that correct? Like we're calculating land sales as part of our operating budget? I see it's in the 200 accounts, that's why I'm asking.
So yes, so can you pull that up, the last page again, Miranda? You clicked out. So we do budget for land sales, and then the net amount in the land sale category, we move on the final page into a reserve. So all the profit from the land sale department goes into the reserve. So it doesn't have an impact on the mill rate. So you'll see land sales department surplus to revenue 1605550. That's the surplus in the department. So it comes in and it goes back out to a reserve.
Goes into a land sale reserve, I would assume.
Yeah, it goes into a capital reserve.
So my question is, I noticed near the very bottom of this particular spreadsheet that we're budgeting $300,000 over 15 years for the debenture on McLeod Landing. So do we use any of those land sale transfers to augment, bringing down the principal on those debentures for that particular project?
We looked into doing a lump sum payment back to the government of Alberta on our debentures, but there's quite a penalty because they had to borrow the money and give us the money, and if you pay it back early, there's quite a penalty, so.
I understand that, but I guess what I'm trying to get at is the debenture being funded from proceeds from the sales of the lands in McLeod Landing? Or is it being taxpayer funded? This is what I'm trying to get at. Is that a twisted question?
Yeah. The profit goes into a reserve and then it comes back, I don't specifically have a land sale reserve that I push back in to pay for the debenture principal.
That's what I'm getting at, yes.
Yeah, no, I don't.
So it's just a general reserve then?
General reserve.
Okay. I guess what I'm trying to get my head wrapped around, and I apologize to the 5 councillors who were sitting here, I'm trying to get my head around the inputs on McLeod Landing, the expenses, and the revenues that we're recovering from it, because I'm curious about whether we're covering our costs on that development. Does that make sense? So I'm sure somewhere there's a calculation of expenses related to the development and revenues or anticipated revenues from the sales of the land, and I'm curious as to whether we've calculated that highway crossing in with that. Does that make sense?
Yes, and I have a spreadsheet where I've taken our costs and then I've added in the construction costs and what's going into land held for resale and the part that's going into capital, and then our estimate of what we estimated the project was gonna be. And then I have the land sales and what we paid, everybody paid for their lots. So I haven't worked on that in a little while because it's been a little bit busy, but I have one started and I can update it and bring it to council or committee of the whole or infrastructure and finance and give you guys an update.
That would be great.
You betcha.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and along with that, when we set the sell price of those lots, that's the analysis that we used back when estimated construction cost divided by land area, and then ultimately came to the sell price that lined up with covering our costs. The whole signalization is one that I'm not 100% sure was in the original, but Anthony may recall better.
No, the signalization was not in the original amount. And Chris will provide this information. When council did make the decision to go forward with McLeod Landing, the land sale price didn't fully and entirely cover the cost of that development. And that would include all of the infrastructure, the roads, the storm ponds, the entire municipal development there wasn't covered. The land sales themselves, there's a different costing for individual lots, and our prices do cover the individual lots, but the development as a whole, we had worked it out, and if I'm not mistaken, there was a 11-year period in which the total cost would be recovered through anticipated property taxes. But Chris can get that. We have a few spreadsheets that we can bring back to council just to remind everyone where we are with that and see where we are currently as far as the recovery. Also to note, the McLeod Landing was developed half using our reserves and half with a debenture. And so we didn't borrow for the entirety of that project as well.
Correct. And I know the actual cost came in a lot less than what was estimated too, correct? So we'll have to analyze based on the actual costs of the project.
I appreciate that, and Anthony knows where I'm going with this, because I don't believe that taxpayers should be funding the development. The development itself should be repaying itself back. That's a philosophy I hold personally, but, so that's why I want to see the spreadsheets, and so I appreciate the fact that Chris will update those for me, and we can see where we can go from there. Now, are all the lots sold in that subdivision?
All of our residential lots are currently sold or conditionally sold. And then the multi-unit lots, we have one sold, two more with a very interested buyer. And then commercial lots, we haven't sold any commercial lots yet.
Anything else on the operating budget? Comments, questions? If you have any, feel free to email Anthony and check in. Otherwise, if we're good, we'll move on to our capital budget plan and we'll ask, would like to speak to this one, I think Anthony, did you?
Brendan will speak to this one.
Brendan, okay.
Thank you. So on this one, and I was talking to Chris a little bit today, and so I may be exposing myself a little more than I'm hoping. So this is my first capital budget that I'm putting together. The spreadsheet that I had that we were using before, I had some questions about. So I took the time to make adjustments, so that I understood where things were coming from. So I just want to touch on a couple things. I did talk to all of our departments when we were looking at this. I wanted to make sure the numbers were right. And so I went through, and that took longer than I anticipated, but I wanted to get something in front of the council so you can take a look at things. Some things to note, there are items on here that we have not agreed to. So for instance, the phase 3 in McLeod Landing, we have some numbers in there to try and get that looked at. But I guess I'm not proposing that this is going to start happening next year, but there's some numbers that we can start looking at. And so there's that one. I know there's also, like for instance, I think in the Public Works, we're talking about those outdoor patios, and I put some numbers in there so that we could be looking at that. But I guess just as a heads up, this isn't finalized by any means. It is draft. What I'm trying to show is, when talking to the departments, here's some of the priorities that we're seeing in operations that should get some focus. So whether that looks like we want to be pushing into next year, or whether we push that on further, I'm hoping that we can have that discussion, and then as I go through and deal some more, or work some more details, and make sure that we're matching up, so that we are getting a balanced sheet as far as our capital projects, that's organized so that I have something more clear going forward. But I guess, do we want to go through these kind of line by line? And again, opening myself up, this is my first time, so I don't know what the expectation is there. So if anybody has any thoughts of what they want to do, I can talk to specific items. We can go into it on a high level, or where we want to approach that.
Anthony, did you want to comment on that, where you want to see us go? I know last year's we've had a bit of a summary with each line item, kind of highlighting some of the items, but I think overall most of them are self-explanatory.
Yeah, the information provided here by Brendan, most of it is pretty simple to understand. So I don't think the summary was necessary this go around. I think if we were to just take a quick look through the departments just so that council is aware. I think it is a good idea for council to be aware that, you know, when they see dirt moving in this part of town, that they're like, oh, I was once told that that project was happening and it's not a surprise to me. So I think, Brendan, if you'd be comfortable with just to go through the projects very surface level, just in each of the areas to show kind of what's summing up these projects, I think that would be valuable. It would only take a couple minutes, I think.
Okay, no, that sounds good. So if we start with facilities, and I'll focus on the 2026 as far as some of the higher priorities. So we are looking at the Scouts Hall, doing a complete overhaul on the Scouts Hall, changing some of the layout, looking at the heating, the air conditioning, kind of going through that building. The hope there is that we make that more available to potentially increase, and Lisa can talk about that a little bit more if she'd like, but to increase that rental cost, but also to make it more appealing for different activities in that building. There's machinery and equipment costs. One thing to note, we are looking at an autonomous mower and doing a setup there. So we are looking at some aspects of that, what that can mean as far as trying to keep up on some of our parks, and having that available. So there's some testing there, but we do have a good backing on what the capabilities are there. So that's where that kind of investment is. Skid steer sweeper, that's a direct link to some of our trails and pathways, to make sure that we're doing the maintenance and we have that in our facilities. There is a cost there, the 70,000 for an equipment storage building. And like I said, there is some flexibility there as far as what year that looks like and looking at some other options. But there is, as we build up our mowers, as we build up our equipment to make sure that we're able to maintain the different facilities around town, we do want to make sure that we're protecting that investment through the winter season. The 150 park, so there was some delays in what we were trying to get accomplished this year. And so there is some carryover from last year that's moving into, oh, sorry, I'm speaking in terms that it's 2026. So there is some carryover from this year into next year, with some of the things that are already lined up. So some of that money would be coming from 2025, but then again, investing into that park. The arena floor, that's already in full swing, as approved before. So we already have that bid. We've accepted it. We have an agreement. We're working on schedules right now, working with different groups, and we'll actually see a deposit going in this year for next year's work. So that's where that number is coming from. As we move down, there's some, essentially we have in the facilities department a lot of our town buildings, and so we're looking at some of the things like listed there, the heat floor exchanger, condensers, pressure safety valves, those types of things that have a certain lifespan. So we're anticipating that changing those out, that's where those budget numbers are coming from. And then at the bottom there, the final one here in 2026, so there is some cost, and this is directly linked again to McLeod Landing. There is town property in McLeod Landing that we do want to make sure that we're doing the irrigation, the landscaping, those kinds of things, and that includes some in between some of the phase one, as well as around that dry pond in the southeast corner. You guys, any questions on those or where those are coming from?
Just one, I guess. How much, like if we budgeted something last year, does that need to be, because for some reason I thought we had budgeted some of these items in last year's numbers. Yeah.
I just picked up on that. Thank you, Mayor Fader. So I was just I wrote a note for Brennan that 150th was budgeted for 400,000. And so that's already been budgeted for. So if there's an additional 100,000 that's coming in 27, that's all we need in there because we already have money committed to that in a reserve.
And that would be the only one? The only one that you've seen? Like,
so far.
okay.
Did you
good.
see another one?
Well, I was just thinking the ice arena, was that in last year's?
No,
No, that wasn't.
no.
Okay. It was close.
I see what you're saying, Mayor. Sorry, that is my fault. I was looking at just taking those costs, and so I did add that onto those numbers. Yep, that's understood.
Very good. Yeah, maybe go ahead with the next section on plants.
Okay, so looking at the plants, so we have, so there's a couple linked here. So there's the top one, the portable generator set, and then a transfer switch to the Kaizen raw water. So what we're seeing here, and these numbers in past budgets were further out into the future. What we're seeing is that we're having some failures right now, that doing repairs right now will cost us about 30,000. So by bringing these forward, we're potentially saving that 30,000, setting up these two projects, and then using a common generator to support that. So those line items were in here before, but they are being brought forward. And that one, maybe I could put a summary together just to get some details on that. I can read it to you, but I might need to get some more information from our expert to even explain some of the things he was talking about. But essentially, we're looking for a common generator. We can set up the two areas with the same setup so that we can use one generator. And then we're looking to have a refurbished generator that we already have some eyes on that would run both those things. So by bringing that forward, we're trying to avoid the right now repair costs by just doing the work that we had planned for later.
I'm wondering on some of these, if we could get the information on what we're saving. So we got what we're spending, but like, and it seems to me that the water reuse line we had in there last year, but on that one, we looked at what we were gonna save, and it was a no-brainer to do it. So if we could have that, that would take the sting out of the amount of some of these.
And just a quick question on the generator. Obviously, at the water treatment plant, we invested in a large generator, I think just 2 years ago or so. Obviously, those can't be shared. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, so this will be a portable generator outside the plant.
Okay. And then the water reuse line.
Yeah, so the water reuse line was in the budget for this year. We went through process and we found that, so we have all the approvals, we can make that work. This year we went through a bunch of the drawings, and then we also had, we did a bunch of work with the engineers to make sure of the system. The expectation is that there will be, it will be higher cost than what we first anticipated. So this is another one where I've put the total cost, even though we had some in this year. So I'll have to look at that as well, just to make sure that that's clean.
Sounds good. Any other questions on plants? Moving to Public Works.
Okay, so in Public Works, we'd already established, and from what I saw in our budget, those top line items essentially to build out into different areas to help improve different structures. So that would be the sidewalks, the relining of wastewater mains, asphalt overlay, and the gravel road pavement. So what we're actually looking at this year is using some of those costs where, and I'll give you a little bit of background as well, but using some of those costs to pull together to look at a bigger project. So one of the bigger projects that we want to look at is 16th Street, where we can actually redo the surface, put the sidewalks on, control some of that drainage. And so we're using some of the funds, or proposing to use some of those funds that we would use on other projects to make sure that we can cover that cost. So you'll see down further, there's a 220 down there for 16th Street. So if we take that 220 and add some of those other costs, then we're looking at completing that one big project and getting that pushed through. One of the things that we're looking at is that even though we have these costs up and looking at something like the asphalt overlay, we are finding that we're running into some problems where we have, and I know it's still a big amount of money, but a smaller amount of money. We do some milling, we put new asphalt over it, but we're doing that sometimes on roads that we, in the back of our mind, know we need to change out the deep utilities. We need to do some upgrades, some other things like that. So instead of putting this money into something like that, where it looks great and it helps with the surface and we're doing all of that, we're looking in 2026 to try and put that to a road where we can bring it right down, build it up, do the do the profile of the road, do the sidewalks, and complete that task. So that's part of the recommendation for 2026.
Question there before you leave on that. Do you have kind of an estimated total cost for the work that you're proposing on 16th Street? I'm just wondering what percentage or what other funds are you looking to draw
Yeah.
from in order to cover the full cost of that?
So the estimate is the 220 that's down on that further line down, and then adding the 75 and the 150, I believe. And I think, yeah. So we're looking at, what would that be? So almost 450 for 16th.
Mr. Mayor, if I might. So we looked at 16th from first to second years ago, but there's a reason there's no sidewalks on that street, because there's such elevation shifts on a number of those lots on the east end. And at that time, and perhaps engineers have thought differently, we had to run a full extension of the storm system in there to try and alleviate flooding problems that would occur when we put up sidewalk and curb along the south side of that street, most specifically. So are you saying that 400 and some thousand is going to do all of that?
What we're looking at is the potential to do a super sump. So where we're gathering that water. So we're looking at that right now as an option, because there is some flooding that is happening, like, kind of on the east end, closer to the Second Ave. And so there are some concerns there by those houses. So what we're trying to do is work with engineering to look at how we move that water, and even moving it on the surface of the roads if we can change the grade enough. But we still need to look into that. But part of that is having a super sump, not necessarily tied directly into the stormwater system. Okay.
That intersection floods already, with drainage going into those off lots there that are undeveloped. So, and I'm sorry, but this one spikes me because of course I have a house sitting right there that the water would flow right off that street. That's why it was such an expensive fix the first time, because we didn't think we could control it. So something I'd like to have looked at a little tighter anyway. The sumps work good in a lot of places, but in heavy rainfall, and of course I've had residents on that street for years say, how come we've never done this? And that was why we hadn't done it, because of the challenges with the stormwater, and because a lot of those houses are actually far below street level, right? So there's extenuating issues, or anyway, something to keep in mind, and something I'll certainly want to be in touch with you on, because I know I'm going to get asked, because these are my neighbors that are going to be affected. Thank you for the.
Okay. Where were we at again? Gravel road, I think you covered that. Pavement upgrade.
Let's see. So I guess one of the big ones, looking at 10th Street, and that's from First Ave to Fifth Ave. So I know we talk about that a lot. So if you see on here, we're looking at doing some engineering, making sure of where we're at, getting that kind of shelf ready as far as the drawings and the plan, and then moving into 2027 to do the majority of that construction work. So that's a huge one. That's the one we've been talking about. That one goes down into the deep utilities. That's pulling it right down to a brand new road in every aspect. So that's that's proposed, and I don't know, I guess Anthony can talk to this a little bit more, but what we're looking at potentially pulling that forward is looking at some of those land sales, as well as some of the reserve that we already have built up, to take care of looking at that cost.
And I think we discussed this in length. I guess it would have been last year when we did the budget and when we decided to put some, the $400,000 amount to this project specifically, as this project had been, I think, forever coming down the pipe, but always getting kicked 1 or 2 years back into the future. And so one of the things that Brennan had mentioned that I'd said is, because we have, some strong land sales, because we have, some okay reserves and those types of things now, the challenging part with that specific area of town is that the property tax values amounts it would take quite a long time to pay for that infrastructure upgrade. If we were to try to recover, let's say, recover the debenture with the property taxes, or however you want to look at it, it was quite challenging. And so I think it's time to bite the bullet and have that upgrade to that street that's been long overdue, and then where we have the funds to take care of it, hopefully without having to borrow much at all or any.
The process for that would be if we have it shovel ready, per se, then that's when we would have to do a full review as to when we do it, correct? Like, I think it's great to have it shovel ready and ready to go. Because you never know if there's infrastructure dollars that also become available and.
Yep. Yeah, and so this year's budget would be approving us to get it shovel ready,
Yeah.
right? Essentially. And then, like you said, grants, how we turn out, how we end up this year, what next year looks like. There's a lot that plays into what 2027 will be. But rather than putting it in 29, so we can kind of ignore it, putting it up nice and close so that we can actively plan for it and move forward with it.
Very good. The Public Works upgrades,
Yeah, so this Public Works upgrade, so I think we had talked a little bit about that in the operational budget. So we do have some numbers in there. So this was pulled out of there. So this is the Public Works building, doing some renovations in that building. And then, like we talked about at the beginning, there is that 300 and almost 20,000 for next year, and then the 2.6 almost million in 2027. So again, this would be for McLeod Landing Phase 3. And like I said, we haven't had final discussions on that, where we want to go with that. So these are some numbers to look at and kind of the estimates that we have right now from engineering, just kind of on a high level of what that might look like. And so just breaking it up over a couple of years, because there is a fair bit to put into it to get that ready, the shelf ready, and then move into construction.
if I might ask on that one, like, it's a bit concerning for me right now that we have no residential lots for sale. And this would probably put it to the end of 2027, almost, before there's any residential lots available, which is not good. So I would strongly advocate, if the administration has a waiting list of people and there's an opportunity that we can gain some solid interest to recover most of the infrastructure costs, then I think we should be looking at doing that sooner than later.
I guess maybe just to speak on that, talking to our engineers and just looking at how Phase 1 and Phase 2 have gone. So this right now, if we move ahead quickly, is kind of what we're looking at for when we could actually have the actual structure and things in McLeod Landing Phase 3. So this can't be pulled forward necessarily. There is time, and even when we think of the shallow utilities, we're looking about a year from having the drawing say, yeah, we need to go, to having that whole process go and actually get those shallow utilities in. So even if we had that ready right now, we're still looking into about 2027 where we can say, yeah, you have a lot with those utilities. So we did push really hard on phase 2 of McLeod Landing for the very reasons that you're talking about. And so we're still working through that, and we're working with residents to make sure that they're clear, but we still won't have those shallow utilities, even though we were done all the civil work and all the roads and everything, we still won't have those shallow utilities done. We're looking into the end of January in 2026. So just as far as thinking about timelines, this isn't a, hey, we should push this out. This is a, if we move ahead and do that right now, this is kind of where we're looking.
I guess maybe I'm oversimplifying because in my mind, phase 1 and 2 is the bulk of the engineering and the design. Correct? In terms of storm, they've had to plan all of that. I'm just curious why it would take that long to do engineering for 2 roads that have 21 lots. They're straight roads. There's nothing fancy about them. They're very simple. In my mind, I can't figure out why it has to take a year. Like, that's crazy. If it takes a year to do that, then.
And just to kind of support what Brennan said, yeah, it does seem crazy. I share those similar feelings, especially when dealing with the shallow utilities alone. Like, that's something where they have to have, like, MPE creating their plans isn't going to take the full year. But MPE to create their plans and then having that ready and then having the input from the shallows to overlay it onto their plans, like, and that part, because the shallows take, like Brennan said, a full year to pretty much say, hey, we can get something done for you. And then there's the contracting and there's the pricing and all that stuff. And so, yeah, like when we can go back and say, hey, like this, let's double check, but this was, hey, if we decide to do McLeod Landing phase 3, like, yep, council gives us the thumbs up right now. This is what between the engineers and primary, and we've gotten to know them pretty well because, like Brennan said, we have been pushing on them because, you know, when they say they can be done at this time, and then there's other things that are all involved, and it never is quite done at that time. So yeah, so this is the answer that we received from the engineers and the shallow utility people, that to have it done for 2027 was the fastest expectation that we could get it done. But we'll gladly get a better picture of all of the whys to better present that to council so that you guys can see just why something would take that long.
Yeah, and that's fair. I definitely would push a little and maybe even call some other options just to make sure there's some competitive pressures maybe, but when we have potential investors looking to move employment into our community and we won't have any residential lots available till late 20 or mid 2027, that doesn't speak very well to the community, right? So I think that's a bit concerning for sure.
Mayor Fader, how many lots did you say were in phase 3?
If I remember correctly, there's 21 plus the 4-acre piece. It's not a lot of lots.
Is that the 4-acre
Seniors.
on the north end?
4.85.
So it's 2 streets. They each have, I believe, 7 lots on either side of the street.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's actually 1.5 times.
So how much of this
3 times
cost
7.
would be attributed to the 21 lots? You know where I'm going with this. Are these like 70-foot wide lots, like I saw?
60.
Our current is 66 by 99 is our standard. And so the original plan was planned to be 66 by 99 lots. And generally, the one street with underground and everything's costing us about $1 million. And so you could take the 14 of those lots divided by that. I'm sure it'll come to 1.2 by then. Because yeah, one of the things that we were doing was trying to price it out to see what we had to price our lots at. We would anticipate in phase two for the lots going for sale in the 80,000 range instead of the 70, which is still far higher than they were assessed at or appraised at.
Yeah, but appraisal has nothing to do with what it costs your inputs, right? I mean, if we're dealing with a private contractor, they don't care what your appraisals are. They just care what their ROI is, right? So, and we need to be looking at it in the same light, I think. I'm curious. Obviously, I have a great curiosity about this development, and I don't have a lot of information, so that's why all the questions, and maybe Chris's information can alleviate some of this for me, or perhaps it's a multiple conversation. I guess what I'm saying is I would like to see a lot more information on McLeod Landing, because again, I don't want to see the taxpayers picking up or having to collect 15 years of taxes to pay for this development. That's not how we should be doing that. And you're going to hear that repeatedly from me. If we have to adjust maybe the size of the lots to make them more viable or make them more cost effective from our perspective. But I'm only spieling because I just haven't got any information on it. So if I could get some, that would be really great. There'll be a lot less pain in the rear for everybody probably then too. So thank you.
Any other comments on McLeod Landing Phase 3? Does council share those sentiments that it should be sooner than later, or is that?
Shallows are challenging and you're at their mercy basically, right? That's the Atcos and the Telluses and the Fortises, yeah.
Of course, I'm in favor of that. It sounds like they're doing what they can to move things along as quickly as they can. I think we're, developing that property was something that had been punted down the road, and great, the council has made the move to do it, and I appreciate that we're doing it as fast as we can. My question that follows is, where's our next development for residential lots? And we're trying to catch up to the demand. This isn't going to satisfy the demand. And so we need to be looking at getting those processes started so that we've got some other residential lots coming on, 28, 29, 30, whatever.
I think that was something we should definitely be looking at our council retreat early next year, just kind of seeing where the area structure plan's at, what we have reviewed in the past, what we can look at in the future, what we did on 9th, what happens after the 9th project, so all those things we can look at, I think would be a good time.
Yep, I think that's, like you said, we will be reviewing the south area in January. But yes, because these things are about at least 18 months out, if not more. Getting a good understanding of the demand so that we can have these things in queue. And speaking to Sean's point too, right? The fact to get them to recover the costs and hopefully a little bit extra, that would be ideal, because if we're going to grow at a certain rate, we can't wait. We can't always wait on the property taxes, or else we wouldn't be financially sound when it comes to the cash flow of those. But
Yep. Very good. Well, thank you, council. And then the last line item there was the 4th and the 22nd Street. I believe that is the really low street down from the arena
Yeah.
that's had some flooding problem.
Yep, and this, we have a solution, we have that out, and that was supposed to happen this year. That got pushed too late into the year, so this would be another example where I moved that money, even though it's already in 2025 to 2026. But we do have a plan on that, and we are looking to do further catch into the stormwater system at the intersection just up the hill along 22nd. So that's in the works.
Very good. And then fleet equipment.
Yeah, so just looking at this, and there are some things, like I said, that we can move here. So we do have a plan to make sure that we have our fleet that we're going through and we're making sure that we have equipment that we can use and that's safe for our crews. So I think these are fairly standard. There is a 22,000, like I said, that hasn't been approved there for street patios. But the other ones are vehicles for the different departments, as well as that loader that I'm still looking at as far as what that looks like and where we're at with the one that we do have currently.
Very good. Any questions on the fleet equipment? The command truck, what one would that be? Is that fire department?
Yes, sorry, that's the fire department. I have talked to the fire department, so I'm getting some background on that as far as what that looks like for us in the MD. But my understanding is that is on the town to provide that vehicle. I did talk to Alan a little bit, what his truck's looking like, those kinds of things. So we're in discussions right now, but that's what that is.
Yeah, so that's the fire chief's truck, correct?
Yes,
Yeah, and I think that's a fairly aged one currently.
his is, yes.
Okay. Any other comments on the fleet equipment? I see the street patios, but I think we have more wholesome discussion on that coming up.
We didn't really have it scheduled. The last time that we brought it to council, we said that we would discuss adjourned budget deliberations. And so this is kind of that opportunity now where we can discuss it just a little bit more and see what council's appetite to go forward with the construction of 2 patios. Since we did mention briefly last time that the 750 that had been initially proposed to kind of rent out the patios for that patio season would not be a viable option for the 2 businesses that did use them this past year. It was $250 is what we had charged them. The pilot program, they said that was fine, nominal cost. They didn't really draw any extra revenue because of the patios that they could see, but they just provided that additional space that was outside on our main street to use. So that's kind of where they were sitting. They wouldn't necessarily, they still want to support the program, they like the program, but they don't see any extra revenue because of it. So to increase the rental cost for that in the season wouldn't be viable for them. If council is comfortable of just providing it as a tourist economic boost to Main Street to entice people to spend additional time on Main Street, it would kind of just be that added piece that town council wants to support. But I don't know that we have a revenue source that we could generate to repay the cost of building those patios. So that's just where we're looking at for council's input and feedback. And that's kind of where we're standing right now.
Is there an opportunity to suggest sponsorship of the?
We had a brief conversation about sponsorship, and because it's typically used by a business, most people don't want to sponsor a business when they're drawing business or revenues or whatever from it. So I do feel like that's a little bit challenging unless it was the chamber perhaps sponsoring the patios to reduce the cost for that business. And that's about the way that we looked at it. I just don't see how a sponsorship would work for that.
Yeah,
Or how you
short of
were-
adding some advertisement on the patios so that it advertises more, but that becomes a historical question concern.
And we did specifically address that when we took the pilot project out, that we couldn't put additional signage on there because of the historical nature of the area that they are in.
Have we talked to the Chamber of Commerce if they had any interest in cost sharing?
My understanding is they don't have the funds to build them. They don't have a storage facility to store them, anything like that. I did not speak to them about a sponsorship, if they would be willing to subsidize it on an annual basis and perhaps try and offset the cost a little bit. But even with that small, perhaps from the chamber, it would still take some number of years, even though it's only 22,000. If you're only collecting, $500 or $1,000 a year, we're still talking 20 plus years to see that investment return. So again, it becomes, I think, more of the, are we wanting to support Main Street and the visiting of Main Street, and is this too much or enough that council wants to support that tourism and economic piece for Main Street.
Councillor Orr?
This one, to me, is a public perception problem in my mind. I'm all for attracting and encouraging people to spend time on Main Street, and the surveys that were done were positive. When you say that the two businesses that benefited from this, they say they didn't get a benefit. They didn't recognize any financial benefit. And so when we say that, well, it's getting people to stay downtown more, well, is it really? It doesn't seem to if their numbers, and maybe it's just not measurable. They weren't saying, well, how many new customers did we get because we had a patio? I think if a citizen were to look at this and says, oh, council just spent $22,000 and they're benefiting two businesses at downtown, the public's going to look at that and say, we're benefiting two businesses downtown. They're not going to look at their books. They're not going to trust that there wasn't a benefit to those two businesses. And I have nothing against those two businesses. I'd love to see people patronize them. And so the perception is we're assisting two businesses with additional seating space. And I have a hard time arguing against that perception. That's what it looks like to me as well, even though they say it's not a additional revenue generator. So to try to look at it separate from that, and does it just add to the ambiance of Main Street and there's people sitting there? There's some truth to that for sure. But I don't know if there's enough to offset the clear perception of a bias towards those particular businesses that would capitalize on that. And so I have some trouble, even though I think the idea, I'd love to see some more patios and whatnot, but if there's no economic benefit for a particular business to have it, then that's challenging. I would prefer that we give them opportunity to do it themselves and pay for it themselves and make use of it themselves. But if they see no economic benefit in doing that, then they're not going to do it. But I'm not sure we should subsidize them and give them a $22,000 or half of that benefit. So there's some concerns that I have about justifying it.
Sure, so if I could just comment on that a little bit. So the two businesses that use them this year aren't necessarily the two businesses that would use them next year. We put it out there for each of them, so it wouldn't necessarily be the same businesses every year that use them. So that's just a clarity point there. We do also have the option that if Brooks doesn't have people in their own community using their patios again, that we may be able to rent those again from Brooks and use them. So we don't necessarily have to make the investment right now to build these patios. If we want to try it again next year and Brooks has the pieces available, we could certainly, try it again next year too and see what that looks like. Maybe weather will be a little better. Last year the weather wasn't great for outdoor patio season, but we know we have very different weather year to year, and so that's just an option that we can consider as well, that if we don't want to make the investment this year, that perhaps we try again next year with the Brooks patios, see if there's a little bit different numbers, visitors different restaurants or establishments using them. There's quite a few variables that I think we could look at again next year as well.
And sorry, what was the cost for these again?
About 11,000 a piece.
No, to rent them.
Sorry, I think we,
Charge $250 a year.
that's what we charged last year for the businesses to use them for this season. But from Brooks, I think they ended up doing the neighborly thing and barely charged us. It was our rent basically covered the transportation cost of getting them here and there, which Westco donated a portion of that as well through the chamber to pick them up. We just took the time to install them and then we returned them to Brooks. So that cost kind of just offset that.
And do you know what Brooks would charge for their Main Street merchants?
I believe it was $800 a year for patio, and it depended on the size and the number of pieces that they used as well, because they have very modular and different layouts that they have available for use, whereas we chose just to stick with a very specific rectangle shape. They have the option of some additional sidewalk pieces, and all just depend on where they were placed, so it was very variable dependent on what sizes and what pieces they used.
Yeah, personally, yeah, echo Councillor Ward's sentiments to some degree. I don't know that this should be borne by the town to that extent, just because it's a nice thing. There's a lot of nice things, right? So if it affected all the businesses on Main Street and they're all able to equally make use of them, whether it's improvements to the sidewalks or something, that's one thing. That's where I think the only way we could look at this is a bit of either a sponsorship or a cost sharing or something that shows that the community's invested into it to some degree. I gotta think if you go down Canmore, Banff, like I can't imagine the town subsidizing their outdoor patios at all. I don't know how that works exactly, but patios are a going concern, and it's should be an advantage to a business. If it's not, either it's the climate that's not allowing it, and maybe Fort Macleod just doesn't work for outdoor patios due to the wind and the climate weathers that we can get. So I don't know. But I have a hard time, yeah, and it's not a huge cost, but those are just the hard costs.
I think our role maybe should be more to regulate the use of those types of things as opposed to buying them and renting them out to different businesses. I really believe it puts us in a catch-22. If we buy two and two others want them, are we gonna go spend another $22,000? And like, where does the line draw and who gets them? And do you go around the corner? Is it just the one block? It opens us up to a whole bunch of challenges unnecessarily, I think. And if they're viable, then we set regulations, specifications in the historic area and let them go to town. If they're not viable, then we're wasting our conversation probably, right?
Yeah, and if they're viable enough, I think a local business would build patios and rent them to the local mainstream merchants, right? Because it's a viable option for them to rent.
But even there, we couldn't allow too many on Main Street or it would interfere too much with parking. Unless we're going to say everybody park on the other side and we make it a non-driving street. And so, like I say, I think there's a whole can of worms that can get opened up. If it was successful, it would become a can of worms, and if it's not, it's money spent that we shouldn't have spent.
The policy already limits how many can go on Main Street.
Sure, so then you get, so which of the businesses that want to do it, if there's 4, which 2 get to do it and which 2 don't? You
Yeah,
can do it
that-
half the summer and you can do the other half. Well, no, I'm not interested. It's just,
First come, first serve, I guess.
well,
I'm not
that
sure
might be
how the
one way.
policy speaks.
There was a application phase where they would go out and people could apply, and it would be food establishments first and then on a first come, first serve kind of basis. But I do think what I'm hearing is that council's not super eager to support it at this time. Perhaps next year we can speak with Brooks again and see if they have the ability to rent to us again, and maybe that's an ongoing thing that we continue to look at and see what that looks at, or what that looks like rather for especially next year, and then if we want to revisit it again at that time, we can certainly see how it plays out.
And then if local business wants to apply, then they can we can facilitate them renting from Brooks. It doesn't have to be us.
Yes, I just don't know how intermunicipally it works. A lot easier when you know that liability is being shared between another municipality. I'm not sure that Brooks would entertain a private enterprise doing that. But certainly the conversations can be had. And like Councillor Patience mentioned, there could be the potential of a individual business approaching us to build their own, and what that looks like or what our standards of build would be. We can address that at the time too.
Which I believe was in the policy already, no? Yeah. All right, so does that answer that question for now? Anything else on the capital budget? Councillor Monteith.
When this comes to council, I think last year when the capital budget came, each item was allocated either for borrowing or reserves or a grant or whatever. So can we do that the same way? And will we also get our reserve information at that same meeting?
So I provided the reserve. I'm just gonna yell really loud. Okay. So I did provide the reserve spreadsheet at the infrastructure and finance meeting. So I've given you my year-to-dates, but
It's Chris.
oh my gosh. All right. So I did give you year-to-dates of reserves with, so I had beginning of the year reserve, what we had spent so far on our capital projects that were coming out of those reserves, and the estimate of our end of the year reserve, but it doesn't have our surplus push in yet, because we do that at year end. So I've given you kind of an estimate for the end of the year. But once we have capital budget for 2026,
See, I look at it the other way. For me to approve the capital budget, I'd like to know what the reserves are and how far we're going to drive it down with the proposed budget and sort of go from there.
so I think it's gonna be we have to, Brendan and I have had a conversation, and I said, council's gonna wanna know how we're funding these projects. Because those are our parameters. We have to have the financing and the funding and the reserves and the grants to fund these. So he's got him and I have to sit down and go through those numbers together and what can we afford. And then once we're tighter on the 2026 projects, and I know we can pay for it, then I can give another reserve spreadsheet to council.
And that is on the sheet that I have. So I haven't refined that to show which reserves, but I have taken the numbers that Chris has given me, and so that will be presented as well.
All right, that's the capital budget. There's a little bit more discussion, I'm sure, but this is preliminary anyways. What's the next steps, sorry, for the capital budget? When would you like to see final approval?
So my understanding is that we need final approval before the end of the year. And so I'll be taking this, refining it. I'll get where those reserves are coming from, the grant money, where that's coming from. And then I'll use that to make sure that I'm shifting, if we can, push things out certain years if we need to, so that you can have a holistic view of where that money's coming from.
So, Mayor Fader,
Yes.
we have an infrastructure and finance committee meeting next month, and maybe it could come there for council to review before it comes to council for approval.
Very good. All right, if there is no other discussion on the capital budget, we'll have some more discussion on that. I believe that's December 3rd at noon, if I remember correctly. And other than that, we have one in-camera item, so I'll request a motion to go in camera. Councilor Patel makes the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you very much.